Welcome to One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers, where we get curious about what makes us tick. We're here today with a man whose career can claim him a man of the people. Welcome, Ali Moore.
Thank you, Ian. It's a very grand statement to start us off. That'd be a nice epitaph, that, I guess.
Yeah, well, start with the end in mind, someone once said, didn't they? So let's get things rolling, Ali. Thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
So let's just start off with, tell us, what do you do?
So I guess I'm an HR person, really, I suppose, to trade. I've been almost 25 years in a variety of kind of senior HR roles. Latterly, I've kind of diverged somewhat into coaching, the world of professional coaching and consulting. I still do some HR work as well. So that's, I run, I work for Thinking It Better, and I also run my own coaching business as well.
And what's the name of your coaching business?
It's Ali Moore Coaching and Culture.
Okay.
Thanks for the plug.
And of course, as usual, we will put any contact details you like in the comments of this as well, so that people can reach out afterwards. So I guess what would be really interesting is to just navigate the route. How did you end up in HR? How did you end up doing what you're doing now? So kind of take us on a bit of a journey as to how did Ali Moore end up sat here in front of this microphone?
So I'd call it a happy accident, to be honest. So I actually, when I left university, the plan was to be a teacher. I was going to teach what they called, and I don't know what they call it in England, but in Scotland it was modern studies. So kind of social sciences was the kind of thing I was going to do. So my plan was leave university. I was going to do a gap year, and then I was going to go to teacher training university. And I was meant to go to Australia for a year. So I was all signed up. I had my visas and all the rest. I was going for 12 months, and that's what I was going to do. And then I didn't go for a variety of kind of family and other circumstances. I made the decision not to go. So suddenly I had a year that I was didn't really know what to do. And this opportunity came my way to be a graduate production manager trainee in Grampian Food Group, actually. Okay. And I thought, well, this is absolutely not really what I could see myself doing, but it's probably going to pay a bit more than stacking shelves in the supermarket is, and I might kind of learn something. So I thought, yeah, we'll give it a go. And I did that for almost a year. It's probably been 9 months, actually. And, I learned so much in that 9 months. I managed production lines. I managed people who had, I suppose you would describe, quite forcible, formidable personalities, I guess, and I realised I absolutely loved that. I loved, and it sounds very cliched, and hopefully people will appreciate as they listen to me here that, that people thing, it's not cliche for me, it's absolutely real. But, that was where I got that kind of love of working with people, bringing people together, building relationships with people. That was it for me. The managing efficiencies and productivity and all that kind of stuff, it's all important stuff, but it wasn't the thing that really got me inspired. It was that managing relationships and building trust with people and that was what took me into HR. Actually, was I then signed up to do a postgrad diploma in personnel management, as it was still at the time.
So just getting a bit curious at that point there, because I think a lot of people, even if they're thinking about going into management or leadership, they kind of have this preconditioned idea as to it's about telling people what to do, and you have to know more than them. Yeah. What was your experience? I mean, it was obviously it wasn't that.
I was encouraged to be that.
Right.
I would say, and I would say even at that very early stage in my career, I kind of rebelled away from that notion because I recognised myself that's not how you get results. That's not how you build relationships. And I went the complete opposite way, really. I don't think in that 9 months I once kind of pulled rank, if you want to use that expression. I just focused on getting to understand people, finding a bit about them, working out how they best respond to situations, and that's served me well for 25 years, to be honest, that approach.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious, almost before that point, so even before going to university, what was it that drove you in that direction, even before that point?
I didn't go to university till I was 21. So I had about, when I left school with very, very few qualifications, actually, I had about 4 years of doing all manner of different types of jobs, from, working in supermarkets, filing, you name it. I even made holly wreaths one Christmas. I've done it all. And I think what that did for me was it built up a kind of body of life experience quite early on in my life that probably instilled some different thinking in me that than I would have had if I'd just gone from school to university to first job and.
Mm. And even at that point, so, you know, taking a job as a leader, junior leader at that point, what was the Ali like that was leading to that role? Did you like to be in charge or take the lead or be the figurehead? What was going on? What did you enjoy that led you even trying that?
I enjoyed energizing people.
Okay.
And that's still the thing I enjoy now. You know, that was the thing, was just recognizing that I could help people to achieve results. It's no different to now, to be honest.
So then on into HR. So then navigate us forward from HR then. So you've then decided to go down that route.
Yeah. So I went to Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. I did a postgraduate in personnel management, as it was at the time. And, you know, I've done 25 years since. I've done loads of jobs. I've worked with BSkyB, Mighty, eSure. I've done some local government work with the City of Edinburgh Council, massive amount of time at Rolls-Royce, and latterly Sulzer, before joining Thinking It Better and starting my own business.
Yeah.
I would say my career there's kind of phases. You know, I started out my HR career in a couple of just generalist HR roles, you know, learning the ropes. You know, BSkyB, my first HR role, they took a massive punt on me. I joined that organisation stuffing bonus statements in envelopes, right? And I just became so painful for a while as I was stuffing these envelopes, because all I was doing was just asking questions. I was just beyond curious. And eventually I think they thought, let's just give him a job because it'll maybe stop him asking quite so many questions. But they took a big punt, you know, somebody who had no HR experience, and they gave me a role as an HR consultant, and that was my first role. And I was working with people, you know, other people doing that job who'd done it for years, you know, and they just took a punt. And I'm very grateful to this day for the fact that they did. So a couple of generalist roles, and then I would say I branched out much more firmly into what we would call employee relations, you know, trade union negotiations, real, you know, quite heavy duty stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
And then after about 10 years of doing that type of role, you know, in a manufacturing setting and also local government, public sector setting, you know, I kind of realised that whilst I loved building relationships, right, and I always have, and, you know, in the trade union kind of forum, actually, that I learned so much about, you know, it doesn't have to be adversarial. You know, there's another way you can do this. You know, it's all about relationships.
Again, there's stereotypes there, isn't there? I mean, what experiences did you have in that space?
Very, very difficult. You know, if I think all the way through my HR career, you know, in the various kind of trade union recognised environments I've operated in, you know, there's been some difficult situations, you know, reorganisation, you know, having to reduce the number of employees you have, introducing modern working practice agreements that, you know, on the face of it it's something that really you need to do to remain competitive, but these things are emotional, you know, it's change, right? And all change can be quite emotional. So I you know, I've had my share of standoffs, I've had my share of, you know, heated discussions, shall we say. But I found over time that there's a different way to have that type of discussion that isn't about shouting and bawling.
Okay.
Actually, it's quite the opposite.
So tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I think, you know, for me in my time, you know, working in Rolls-Royce, certainly, I came to realise that the way to get stuff done is not to win the argument. It's for no one to win the argument. It's for you just to kind of win-win. You know, it's just to recognise where the other person's coming from and help them to recognise where you're coming from. I know, if I think back to my time in Rolls-Royce, we managed to get some modern working practices agreements in place by doing that, by finding points of, you know, where we all agree and moving forward with that. So I think there was a number of situations where I used a different approach to try and get to where I think we needed to get to, and by we I mean including the trade unions. You know, we tried to find a kind of common point of reference, and that's always been my approach, and that was quite successful on a number of occasions. You can't always be popular, right, doing the kind of role that I've done, and that, you know, again, there has to be a point of acceptance at that. But, you know, shouting and bawling was very rarely my approach to things, to be fair.
So what is the approach? What did you find? What were you learning? What craft were you honing, do you think, at that point?
I think first of all, listening. You know, it's amazing how many people in that kind of forum don't listen. You know, there's always going to be different viewpoints, and the very first steps to try and understand what the opposite viewpoint might be. And you can only do that by actually just kind of holding yourself back a little bit and just hearing what someone's got to say. You know, and that I suppose is something I picked up along the way and have developed over the years as well.
So with all the different roles you've had in, you know, working with people in that HR role, what lessons do you think you've taken from that?
I think always recognise the person is the biggest lesson of all, because whatever context you're in, however much pressure there is, there's always a person, and that person has their own kind of, you know, their own background, their own experiences, and, you know, probably paddling like heck under the surface the same as I am. You know, I think when you start to get to that realisation, everything else is a bit different. So that's been a big thing for me. I'd say it sounds soft, and actually it can be quite hard to do, but just practice kindness. You know, actually recognise, even in the most adversarial of situations, there's a place for kindness, for consideration and respect. You know, all these things.
Do you think there's a change in general about, you know, and I mean in people, society, you know, real or virtual, about this? Because kindness isn't a word that you hear bandied around very much these days, is it?
I think it's being bandied about a bit more, and I think, you know, COVID was a very difficult situation for most of us in one way or another, but what it did do, I think, was land a few insights. You know, some people learned a lot from that period. Some people have learned very little from it, to be honest. But you know, I think there is a sense that actually there is room for kindness in professional life. I'm not sure that was always there, particularly some sectors I've operated in. You know, that would have been very, very low down the list of priorities at one point. A little less so now, I think.
And kindness doesn't have to mean a lose-lose position, does it? It's
quite the opposite.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about that.
I think it kind of loops back in. It's a bit like the listening that we've just been talking about. You know, if you can actually listen to what somebody's, you know, saying, which I guess gives you a window into how they're feeling if you listen well enough, that is in itself an act of kindness, right? But it's an act of kindness for yourself ultimately as well, because it's going to improve the situation for both of you.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because often a popular greeting, isn't it, is to say, you know, morning, how are you?
Yeah.
And I wonder how many of us, when we ask that, are kind enough to actually really listen and act when the answer isn't not very well or not very good.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And I've long had the kind of view that don't ask that question if you're not going to kind of engage with it and actually follow up. You know, one of the things I always kind of look out for, you know, is, how are you today? And I'm fine. Okay, that's the cue for a lot of people to move on and start talking about work or just do something else. But for me, I kind of just let that be for a minute and just see what else is coming. Yeah. Because I'm fine is very rarely all. You know, and they might be fine, they might be absolutely fine, and you get to hear all about exactly why they're fine. Or you might just once or twice, you know, hear where they're maybe not so fine.
Well, there's a bit of a thing, isn't there, as well? I mean, and this is the fascinating thing about talking to people, isn't it, and being interested in this space is, and this might even be a British thing, I don't know. Our, in general, conditioned position that we start from is one of mediocrity, isn't it? You know, how are you today? Not bad.
Yeah. Well, it's a very British thing in particular, that, isn't it? Not bad. Maybe from a couple of generations ago as well, but yeah, not bad.
Yeah. Let's be completely average today, shall we? And that's okay, isn't it? I mean, I think that's the thing is understanding. I mean, I know something in the space that we both operate in. There's a lot of stuff out there at the minute about just smiling, it'll be okay. You sort of, dare I say, sort of happy clappy, you know, believing you can achieve anything you want in the whole world. And whilst there's elements to positive thinking and belief in everything, it's, you know, we're going to have, there's a balance, isn't there?
No, I think there is, and I think positivity is a wonderful thing. You know, realism is also a kind of wonderful thing, and, you know, trying to find a balance with these two things, I think that's possibly the kind of greatest thing of all. I guess. Yeah. No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because
and being kind to someone is often helping them have a realistic belief about themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I do this a lot in the kind of coaching stuff I do now. You're trying to find that balance between finding, you know, I'm not finding, you know, goals for my clients I work with. You know, they're doing that, but all the time I'm trying to find the balance between trying to get them to a point where they're reaching a point of something that's realistic for them, but actually they're pushing themselves a bit as well. They're stretching themselves. They're not always just staying in the comfort zone, and that, you know, that's been a big thing throughout my career, and actually a lot of the people that I've worked with, I've always been kind of encouraging people, working with people to help them to be the absolute best they can be. And that, you know, getting back to the career question as well, you know, after 10 years of employee relations discussions, I had this kind of epiphany where I thought, well, actually it's about employee, you know, direct employee engagement really is the kind of thing, you know. And that led me into culture and really much more deep-rooted focus on people's mindsets and behaviours and you know, what helps them to be at their best. And that's been my thing now for 10, 15 years, I guess.
So let's go there, because that's because obviously so far, you know, we've mapped the move into HR, and again, a lot of people have preconceived ideas about HR, human resources, what it's all about.
Whereas, I have a view in these words themselves, by the way.
Okay.
Which, you know, human, for me, the human's the important word there, and you know, I've been in the world of HR for 25 years, and being honest, I've never been entirely comfortable with the concept of human resources or human remains and all the other kind of jocular terms that you get.
Yeah.
It's people for me. You know, your introduction, your very kind introduction, people. That's it. You know, some companies are starting to recognise that and use that word now rather than human resources, which is, you know, it's a bit impersonal, a bit.
Because we get the role people partner here, don't we?
Yeah, people partner, chief people officer. You're starting to see that kind of creep in. People director, all these kind of things. You know,
Yeah.
And my thinking about a job title has it, for example. You know, and that's quite deliberate.
So go on. So that is. So tell us a bit about that role and why that name.
Yeah.
That role.
So I think for me, people and culture is what I do, right? And it's what I've always, you know, done for a long period of time. So I really wanted that in the job title.
Yeah.
You know, this job is a fantastic thing really for me, because on the one hand, you know, the director bit's a bit about being able to help to shape this business, which is a really exciting thing to be able to do. And, you know, the people and culture, I get to work with clients. That's the thing, you know. This is a, you know, I have a lot of gratitude for what I'm able to do in my career now. You know, I get to work with clients in a range of kind of people, HR if you want to call them that, projects, and also some fantastic culture change projects as well.
Yeah. So talk a bit to you mentioned about behaviour and culture, and that's really been at the core of your sort of last 10 years or so. So again, they're words that are bandied around, you know, human behaviour, and, you know, or we've got a culture issue, we need to change the culture.
Yeah.
Talk a bit to that about, you know, what does that all mean?
I think it's an easy thing to say, and I've had countless conversations with people who have contacted me to say I need to change the culture of my company. And the very first kind of point of realisation that I have to work with that person on is, do they actually want to? You know, because we all know, many of us, particularly those who have been in a career for a long period of time, you know, we've amassed a great amount of experience, and that can sometimes lead to some quite fixed kind of patterns of thinking. And that's what culture is. It's a kind of culmination, it's a kind of, you know, a coordination, if you like, of a whole bunch of fixed thinking that's kind of like being developed. Fixed is maybe unkind, but it's kind of evolved based on something.
Because culture's kind of an output, isn't it?
Completely. You know, culture is just a collection of individual behaviours, really. You know, all pulled together into, you know, I sometimes describe culture as a house style. And that's what it is. You know, it's just a collection of behaviours. But, you know, the psychology of it is that some behaviours will kind of, you know, take more precedence than others. And as they do so, they kind of become the culture, and other people, in some cases, will kind of be influenced by these permeating behaviours and behave the same.
Because it's interesting, isn't it? You often hear people talk about, oh, you know, we've got a, you know, we have a blame culture here, or we haven't got a good culture here, or we've got a good culture here. And I just wonder, to deconstruct that, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I'm never quite sure when I hear the term a good culture, because that's a very kind of subjective, opinion anyway. I think for me, the question I'd be asking, does your culture support your business? Right. Does it support your values? And if it does, then I guess you could call it a good culture. You could call it a complementary culture, an effective culture, a great culture, I suppose. That these are more emotional words for me.
I mean, this is. I mean, we're getting into some interesting territory here, and again, you mentioned the word values.
Yeah.
So in the whole umbrella of HR, we're now talking about beliefs and culture and values. What do we mean by values?
I think values are how you feel about stuff, I guess, in the simplest form. And I've been involved in a number of kind of corporate values rollouts, and some of them have, where I've been involved, I've tried to do them really well. And the thing you always have to remember with values is everyone has their own. You have your own, I have my own. And a great starting point if you're rolling out corporate values is to try and recognise that and try and find a bridge between what people themselves think and what the company is trying to kind of encourage them to think.
Yeah.
And if you can find some kind of join between these two things, that's an amazing thing. Am I going to agree with everything of my company's corporate values? The chances are probably not. But culturally, if there's an opportunity for me to share how I think about it, that's still quite powerful. We're unlikely to get a situation where our personal values and the corporate values are in absolute alignment. Unlikely.
So when you're working with in your personal coaching space, is that approach the same then with an individual? Is it sort of understanding about their values and what's important to them? Does that wash through to the way you treat with individuals too?
It can do. I think the coaching, obviously the situation will be different depending on what they're wanting out of the sessions. But quite often with coaching clients, I've done some work to really help them to have more belief in the values that they've got. Because of course a lot of people, the classic situation I guess is they don't feel that sense of alignment with the kind of environment that they're working, and they don't feel confident enough to say so. They don't feel confident enough to articulate what they stand for. I mean, I've certainly done some work with coaching clients where we really built up that individual narrative, that individual kind of view of the world, that they start to be a bit more confident in coming out and kind of sharing some of that and contributing to their company's culture rather than kind of like standing back as if it doesn't include them, because it does include them.
And this is where the true value of belief starts to appear, isn't it? Because it's true belief in confidence in yourself and your contribution, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the kind of thing most coaches will kind of say that they really work on, is trying to help their clients to, I guess, be the best version of themselves. And part of that is just having a set of beliefs that kind of work for you and working with them. And sometimes some beliefs need reframed. Some people have developed some self-beliefs that are actually not a representation of what they really are. And a big part of coaching is helping them shine a light on that and helping them to kind of move away from it to something else that will serve them better.
And I suppose there's also the other end of where beliefs can get don't serve us well is where that is the only strategy deployed, isn't it? To say, oh well, yeah, you are gonna be able to climb that mountain, all you got to do is believe you can, and it has a role, but there's so much more has got to go with that to make that a genuine and honest
absolutely
belief, isn't it?
The person needs to actually believe that. It's very easy to make a statement, Adidas used to say impossible is nothing. And I kind of get the sentiment, but as we said earlier, there's a kind of realism there, and it's how you work with someone to help them to be the absolute best they can be. And that's always the words I use. That's not saying that they can do absolutely anything. I'm never quite sure that people can do that. But what it is saying is there's room for a lot of stretch in any particular person, because what you think you can do and what you can actually do, the latter is certainly more. I don't think there's any question about that in virtually all cases.
It's interesting. So many times it's about trying to work out what is important and what is that what does that belief need to be? And I always think back to my mum. It must be 10 years ago now. What was important to her is that she needed to believe she could walk up a set of stairs unaided.
Yeah.
Now, for many people, that wouldn't even be a bump in a piece of paper in terms of a personal goal and something they needed to believe in, but it was huge.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it for everyone. Everyone will have their own set of stairs. It's a great metaphor, actually, for what we're talking about, and it's a lovely example as well. Thanks for sharing it. But that's my role as a coach and actually as a consultant, because it's exactly the same principle for an organisation. You're helping them to be the best they can be, because it gets them a level of performance that's even better than what they've had before.
And of course, again, at the other end of this belief is to sell someone a staircase that they have no hope of ever reaching the top of.
Yeah.
And that's where you get introduced to your own belief system here, don't you? When someone says to you, "That was brilliant, well done," and that little voice in your head goes, "That wasn't that good." You've just kind of met your internal belief system, haven't you? Really?
Yeah. And if somebody else says to me, "That was brilliant, well done," I'm one of the least likely to take that one on board. But at some point you have to just say, "Well, okay, maybe it was."
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So, with all that we've discussed that you've learned, Ali, in your career HR space, I just wonder how your lessons from that play out outside of work.
That quite strongly. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. My wife will tell you that I have my days like anybody. But I think a lot of what I've learned, I've certainly tried to, in the coaching space particularly, do I coach my kids in the way I would coach a coaching client? No, but I do try and ask questions more than make statements. I frequently catch myself, and my wife in her professional life as well. I have loads of advice I could give, and she asks me for it, and I'll give her it. But quite often I find myself trying to kind of help them to find their own way. Just in exactly the same way as I've done at work, because it helps them grow, I guess. And, particularly my kids, I've taken great joy watching them develop in the way that they are, and there is a role there for not just giving them all the answers. I think that's quite important.
Do you think they realise they've been coached?
I think my older girl Freya, I think she's kind of catching on now. I think she can see certain things, but she'll say that you'll ask me a question quite a lot, Dad, when I've just asked you one. Anna, the youngest, is not quite on the page yet, but I suspect she'll get there.
but this is a really interesting area, isn't it? There's I think there's a book by, I think it's Matthew Syed has written a couple of books aimed at
children,
and I think it's so important that we uncover that early, because I wish I'd know, what I've learned in the last 18 years. I kind of wish I'd known that when I was at school.
Yeah, I mean, one of many reasons that my school career was far from stellar was just the style of teaching at the time. I just didn't respond to it at all. I see and witness the way my kids have gone through the educational system now, and whilst it might still not be perfect, there's a kind of insight-based approach that is used in education now that just wasn't a thing when I was at school. You were kind of told, and you were told again, and you were told again, and if that didn't work for you, then that's kind of tough.
I can remember going back to when we were looking at schools for my 2 boys, and I remember going very, very vividly to a local senior school to an open evening, and I think it was year 8 or 9 children, and they were going to come and talk to all these prospective parents, and their presentation was the art of being brilliant. And they spoke about the importance of having a good breakfast in the morning, and it completely blew my mind. I thought, this is brilliant. More of this, please.
Yeah,
and I think it is the book. It's a Matthew Syed. I think it might even be the art of being brilliant. But there's lots around in that space now. I think it's think it's good.
And thank goodness there is,
Yeah.
because I think that my parents certainly they just had to kind of do the best they could. I think there's so much more resources now available for parents to to help them, and I'm certainly very grateful for that.
Yeah, and maybe there's a absolutely positive use and role for social media there, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, undoubtedly, and there's very many less positive uses for it, I think it's fair to say, but at its best, same as everything else, it can be a real kind of force for support, kindness, all these things we've been talking about.
Well, what a journey. Time is catching up on us. I'd like to close with a question that I ask every guest coming on here. So if we think about your journey through what you've learned all the way up through your HR career, and then realizing it's more about people and behaviors and culture and all that great stuff we've been speaking about. Let's assume for the minute we can crack time travel, and you can transport yourself back as early as you like, and you can leave the younger Ali a letter. What would you write to yourself?
It's a very short message. Just believe in yourself more. If I think back to my time as a kid, I wasn't the most confident of kids. And that's been a thing for me, is just over my career, I've realised that I'm quite good at what I do. I realise that I've got some definite skills and qualities, and I think I've built that level of confidence. But as a kid, I'd like that younger Ali just to have that confidence a little bit more.
Just go try it.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant. Ali, it's been a joy. Thank you
you
very much for coming on the podcast. You have been listening to One Thought at a Time. If you have enjoyed today's episode, then please do like and subscribe. And please do investigate our other episodes on YouTube and Spotify and Apple. If you'd like to reach out to us, please do so on TikTok or LinkedIn or Instagram at E&M Travers or at Thinking It Better. And if you'd like to reach out to Ali, our guest today, we'll leave Ali's contact details in the comment section. Thank you very much for watching or listening.